Thanatos is the Greek god of death. Thanatos is probably the inspiration for the name of the Marvel Comics and Marvel Cinematic Universe character Thanos, who basically, with the snap of a finger and the 6 Infinity Stones, acted at one point as a god of death by removing half of all living beings from existence, essentially acting as a god of death. More powerful than and stronger than many of the other heroes, including Thor, who is considered a god. And Thanatos, his family members are also interesting, being Morpheus, the god of dreams, and Hypnos, the god of sleep. Nyx, night goddess. Pretty sure there were some others there. I used to read Greek mythology a lot when I was younger. I wrote about it some more around 2013 in some blog post I called Olympus Has Fallen Down the Rabbit Hole. I then edited and published those blogs just for clarity. I didn't change anything, and turned them into a book. And it was too short for a paperback, so it's only an ebook on Amazon. And then I made a longer extended version called Down the Rabbit Hole, Olympus Has Fallen, which is in paperback because it was long enough. Thanatos is featured in there. And Thanatos is where, of course, we get when we add ology to it, we get thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. And there are thanatologists, those who study death and dying, and work in different areas of grieving and bereaving and adjacent fields. And then there are many people who have severe death anxiety, and that condition, which I assert many people are suffering from that to varying different degrees, just like how everything is on a spectrum. And they're suffering from, it's called Athanatophobia. Again, from Thanatos, the god of death, and phobia from phobos, meaning fear. And Thanatophobia being, this death anxiety, the fear of death, extreme fear of death. It's an irrational fear. Phobias are irrational fears. This is something I learned about the difference between fears and phobias as a student of clinical hypnosis at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. That, for example, if you got bitten by some creature and it left you ill and badly injured, then it would make sense that you were a little bit anxious and stressed out. If you ever came across that creature, you'd be apprehensive. Fear. Logical. Rational, because you've suffered injury from it. You have a direct connection. But if you just heard from other people and imagined and thought about what it would be like to be hurt or made ill by said creature, but it never really happened to you, and you have fear and anxiety and apprehension about it, that is what's known as a phobia. and it's an irrational fear because it has no direct connection to you being wounded or injured in any kind, or startled by it even. So that's the difference between fears and phobias. Fears are rational, and phobias are irrational fears. That's what I learned in the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. So thanatophobia technically is the irrational fear of death, because none of us have died yet, right? I mean, there are people who claim, and there's interesting evidence about near-death experiences, or people who've actually flatlined and, been revived. But can we really say that they were dead? Because if their brain still survives, it's brain death that usually, I think, would dictate actual, full death. Because there are people who have suffered, for cardiac arrest and other failure, and have been out so long that their brain was starved of oxygen and their brain dies completely. And so, and they say this person is completely, they're in a coma, an unrecoverable coma. People say they're a vegetable, which I think is a weird thing to say about human beings. But in that case, they're really gone. Their sending and receiving station, the brain, that part of the nervous system, is wiped out, and the heart's still going. They could be on life support, but they're just never, there's no interaction, no response, nothing, except for the bare minimum biological processes, if that. So people have an irrational fear of death. There's not a bunch of, used to be dead people walking around the earth that are fearing it. It's mostly people who've never had a cardiac arrest or any kind of death experience. We get our experiences of it from the movies and all kinds of other media, from books and magazines and radio, and we hear all kinds of violence and pain and death. And that's what we associate it with, all this pain and suffering. And then there are those of us who are athanatophobic, meaning not afraid of death. I like to break apart the words. A, when it's used in the Greek here, means not. Again, Thanatos, that word part is the god of death. Phobic. The phobos part comes from phobos. The phobe part comes from phobos, meaning fear, and the ick is a suffix that usually means pertaining to. So athanatophobic means pertaining to not fearing death. And I have made this one of my lifelong studies, one of my earliest studies in metaphysics, even before I knew what metaphysics was at all. I think the closest things that I heard about anything close to metaphysics growing up were most definitely the words supernatural and paranormal, and I've heard about parapsychology and those type of things, but never the word metaphysics for some reason. And so, but that was really part of my first glimpse into metaphysics, because I used to think that I saw, ghosts and devils and demons and things like that, and all of these things were pertaining to the afterlife and dying, and what kind of eternal punishments and things like that, or consequences there could be after we die. And of course, why wouldn't I have started? But I got into death metal also in the early 90s, and started my own death metal band around 1992. Same year I started playing capoeira, interestingly enough. A lot of stuff happened in 92, 93. And so athanatophobia, that I'm athanatophobic, I do not fear death in any way, shape, or form. I can't say that it's always been that way, but I've slowly been eroding at my fear of death for many years. And just this year, this month, April of 2026, I coined the term Athanatophobology, the study, and since I coined it, I'm calling it not just the study of not fearing death, I'm calling Athanatophobology, the study of how and why to not fear death. So it's not just the study of not fearing death or people who don't fear death, but we'll study those people who don't fear death, myself included, to know more about how and why. And I know how to not fear death, and I know why one should not fear death. And I have very deep and published reasons for this understanding, and maybe even a belief. But it's a firm conviction that I have that there is absolutely no reason or reasons, no reason, zero, to be afraid of death. It is irrational, and it is not very helpful. People will try to find little nuances here and say, oh, well, the fear of death helps you to, avoid things that would kill you, but that's not necessary. We have startle responses and other biological responses, and in our nervous system, specifically sympathetic nervous system, that heightens our awareness and our bodily function so that we respond quicker. We have adrenaline. We don't feel pain as quickly. Sometimes somebody hurts themselves really bad and doesn't feel it till later, all the way to people as extreme as, as little as getting a paper cut or a scratch or rug or road burn, road rash, to as severe as breaking bones or getting stabbed or shot. The people don't feel it until after the fact because of the adrenaline, the surge, the sympathetic nervous system is fired up. So we have that. And I have found that it is not necessary to be feeling terror, horror, fear, or anything like that in order for those processes in our body to activate and to help us. And so those things can still be activated in response to perceived threats or other dangers, but we don't have to react irrationally, unconsciously, through the sympathetic nervous system into flight or freezing. And I know how to intentionally reroute external stimuli that can be considered to be threats or danger to specific predetermined, pre-scripted, and preset emotional states. I've chosen rage and anger with a slight buffer that contains within it an attack mode. So if my body is startled, if there's danger, I imagine it as a cold, dark, still calm that is surrounding an explosive inferno that is volcanic and potential to detonate, is in the center of there, ready to explode in all directions if necessary as an attack, but it's encapsulated in this cloud of cold, still, dark calm, and still further encased in a sphere of the coldest yet most transparent ice. And all of that is the buffer for this violent, directed, consciously created and intelligently directed rage attack, like the Hulk. There's another Marvel Comics reference, but it's a very similar process, and it may even have been directly influenced by that. I'm not sure, but it probably is. I'm willing to say that it is, because the Incredible Hulk has been one of my favorite all-time characters, and my mom even used to say that I used to Hulk out when I would get mad about things, and I was younger, and it seems an appropriate response to me. I mean, what a better response to happen that if you get startled or injured or something like that, and your automatic response is to be on the ready, to fight. You don't attack right away because it may not be necessary and you can hurt people unduly, unjustly. So that's why that cold, still, dark, calm shroud is surrounding that violently explosive, volcanic rage attack potential And further, that is encased in a perfect sphere of the coldest but most transparent of ice, or whatever you want to call a frozen barrier. I mean, there's ice of all kinds. You can have methane ice, you can have water ice. So ice, it's the frozen state of many things. I mean, technically, you could call solid iron. You can call it, I suppose, ferrous ice. It has a melting point, but I don't know if that counts. Because technically, that's what a solid is at room temperature, right? It's technically frozen. Because it has a temperature at which it could become a liquid and a gas, just like everything else. So, maybe that's going a little bit overboard with the physics. And so, it is possible, from personal experience, I know this, to not have a fear of death. And there are very specific ways to do that. And I hold the key to that myself, and it's something that I can share with others. For now, I'm just putting this on the record and going to be discussing more and more about Athanatophobology, a new field of study within the field of thanatology. It's my new specialization called Athanatophobology, so I'm putting it on the map. I'm really actually excited about furthering and developing this study and sharing it with others. But the roots of it and the reason how I've arrived at it in other ways that I can teach it and what I've connected it to may be very shocking to a lot of people and also disturbing, because it gets at the heart of some belief systems and dogmas that people hold very dear. And so there are some dark layers to go through in order to fully understand Athanatophobology. And we'll continue to get into that. Just know you do not have to fear death. I know, because I do not. Bow to nothing. Submit to nothing. You do not have to fear death at all. I am Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.